Welcome everyone at this special event. We continue in the Shaping of the Future of Synthetic Realities program. In the previous event, we were discussing how AI could be used to produce new ideas about the future. And now we have a presentation of a synthetic poet from Slovakia called Liza Gennart. Liza Gennart is actually in the name of neural network that writes contemporary Slovak poetry. And it is based on a fine-tuned GPT-2 language model. And actually what it is and how it works, you will now hear from Liza's creators, Zuzana Husarova and Lubomír Panák, who are actually now at the space of missing culture in Bratislava, Slovakia. Their talk and demo will be followed by a discussion, so feel free to drop questions in YouTube live chat or in our Discord, where we have dedicated text channel to this event. You can join Discord from our homepage. There are 2 buttons, so go ahead to our website and join. And after discussion, we will continue with a noise performance by Vrtačky po desáté hodině, or in English, drillers after 10 p.m. Feel free to continue partying and chatting on our Discord even afterwards. It is it is a festival and it's Friday after all. And now I can finally say this without any metaphor. The stage is yours.
Hello. Hello and welcome to the festival. We would like to thank the organizers and Lenka and all the other people involved here for presenting us and inviting us here. We speak it in the name of the fictional identity and the fictional being that is called Liza Gennart. She's like a fictional 20-year-old something that decided to create poetry. Actually, that is how we present her, but she hasn't decided herself. We decided for her. And we gave her the name, and the name stands for Lubomír and Zuzana and generative art in the combination of it. And we present her as our third daughter, but Lubo is the mother and I am the father, because it was Lubo's much more difficult job of putting her into life and doing the 3D shaping, the metaphorical 3D shaping of the program into the living being, and me having a much easier father-like job of putting and deciding which results are good enough, where the education should end, and presenting the results in the form of various presentations. So we started presenting her in the form of journal articles and various cultural journals, and later on, because this was in the form of RNN, the character neural network type of model, and later on we switched to GPT-2, and in the form of GPT-2 we created for her the book that's called The Outcomes of Origin, and looks like this, or in Slovak Výsledky vzniku, and it's divided into several sections, and we'll also present one poem in Slovak and another poem in English from her work. And in order to create her, we fed the neural network program with more than 2,000 works of combining the Slovak poetry, some journal articles, and some also feministic text. So those were the works that we gained from the publishing houses Drevo Asart, Aspekt, Face, Divé buky, Európsky dom poezie Košice, Skalná ruža, Ars Poetica, and also we combined it with 3 journals, the whole collections of the journals, like for example Vlna has been here for 20 years, so the whole 20 years of publishing, as well as Glossolalia and Vertigo, which deal with poetry as well as other literature. And also combined it with the open access, old literature that is free of copyrights. So and that is presented in the Zlatý fond deníka SME. And Lubo will tell you a little bit more about the technological process, and then we'll present some of the results in the poetic form and also in the visual form to be more in touch with the design aspect of the festival as well.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So, as Zuzana said, Liza is neural network for creating contemporary Slovak poetry. We started to test neural networks according to generation of text. Firstly, when Andrej Karpathy released his algorithm CAR-RNN, which worked in a really simple way, like it found how the characters are ordered and tried to find some pattern in that. And when we were researching how text can be generated using neural networks, we found that most of the programmers used Shakespeare to train the neural network on. So we started to think about what would be the result if actually the neural network would be fed by more contemporary text. So the hardest part it was to get the data set because Slovakia is a small country and Zuzana is established author. It was for us really easy. Like she knows all the people. Probably when I had asked for the dataset, we will never get it. But because Zuzana knows the people, we were lucky and we got all those all those texts.
And I write nice emails. That's the other thing. And we promise the publishing houses that. We describe the whole process that the neural network doesn't work by just combining the words into existing text. So there will not be the problem with copyright, but she goes through like many iterations, many readings of the text. So it is basically the same as if I was sitting in a library and reading all those 2,000 texts. They just helped us with not having to digitize all of them, but giving us a reading platform that she could go through and learn how Slovak poetry and Slovak literature works.
So, as we mentioned, we started with CAR-RNN algorithm. It worked nice, but the results were more clunky than with GPT-2. But it was actually easier to train, and at the time, even GPT-1 was not there. So we tried it with CAR-RNN, and first poems appeared online. Liza was first as a chatbot who was trained on the poetic texts, but at that time the dataset was really small. We had only the dataset from Glossolalia. So Liza was presented as a chatbot at a literary festival. Which was it, Susan?
Novotvar.
At literary festival Novotvar, and then some of her texts appeared in Glossolalia and in the German journal.
Yeah, and one German journal I forgot.
And then we got the dataset, and GPT-2 was already in the world. And the good part on GPT-2 or the GPT actually is that you can fine-tune it, because GPT-2 language model is trained only on English language or on the text from Reddit and Wikipedia, but by fine-tuning it, you can learn the model actual new language. So it works like it strengthens the connections inside the neural network, inside the model, to reflect the new dataset which was fed. So I was doing research how to do that, and we found a program by Minimaxir or Max Wolf, who created this program, and actually you can run it in the cloud. So if you have dataset, you can train your own neural network on powerful machine. You don't need machine with GPU or like you don't need special hardware to do that. So this is really good. And how the actual work, how the algorithm actual works is that it converts first the algorithm converts the text to numbers. This is called tokenization, and in comparison to RNN, which worked only on characters, GPT uses byte per encoding, so it's something like subwords. So it really gets different context of the text, and actually the whole algorithm can keep context of what it have written much more better than the original, the old algorithms based which were used for training neural networks which generates text. So I will show you how actually computer sees the text. So hope you see the screen. So this is the sentence which was fed to the computer. Then the byte pair encoding algorithm splits it to some smaller chunks, and this is because you need for each text, for the text you need like representation of the words. Mostly those are words, but when you take into account that people write in different styles, you can end up with lot of words in that dictionary. So this byte per encoding gets rid of really huge dictionary, and at the end computer sees just these numbers. So why it's important for computers to see it as numbers, it's that it actually processes it as some time series graph, and at the end when it learns from that graph, which are the original data, how it is look like and what are the patterns inside it, he can replicate or predict actually what would be written depending on what was written. So you can put there some like initializing text which we were using for the titles of poems, and the algorithm tries to find part of the text which comes next with highest probability. And actually, because of this, the GPT-2 model learned how Slovak language works, and especially it learned how the Slovak language in poetical context works.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to keep in mind that it doesn't know. It doesn't know that it works with language. It all the time works just with numbers and tries to just replicate the numbers. So I think like we get several questions about kind of the future of the Slovak poetry or the future of the poetry in general, and we don't think that poets have to be afraid of the artificial intelligence, or that any artists have to be afraid that it would replace them, because we did it as an homage to the Slovak poetry. We also don't want any replacement. We use it more as an approach to experimental poetry. Most of the poet friends that I have take it as or see it as more like an interesting and funny contribution to the contemporary atmosphere of digital media in our world, rather than being afraid of the replacement. But we also got some feedback where some people considered it as the end of the poetry life. But I don't think there will be any end of the poetry life, because I mean the poetry has been here with us since the invention of the language. So as far as the people who will be speaking language, we can be somehow shared that there will be some of us who will be also writing poetry. But I mean, we can see the code.
I will tell probably more about how the training works. So really interesting part is to see how the dataset is trained, because you really see how the network gets sense of the language. So it reads through the text and it does it a lot of times to acquire the knowledge of the patterns in the data. So in the first iterations, when you are debugging and looking at the output of the neural network, you see that it got somehow sense of how language works. Those are some chunks of letters and spaces and ended with a dot, but nothing really makes a sense, but it just looks like some sentence. So actually it really somehow really resembles of how children are learning their language. So at first it's just babbling, and the more the algorithm reads through the text, the more output text seems like a normal text. So you have to stop it at the right time when you see that, okay, at this point the generated text looks like the real one.
So our Liza went through those 2,000 works 60,000 times. So that's quite a lot of reading, much more than I did in my career so far.
Yep. Okay, then we had like in mind how Liza should be presented to people, and we are thinking about a project, how to do that, because she does not exist and she is asked to go to literary sessions to read her works. But in this case, it best works when somehow, when you as a reader reads it by yourself and you interpret those texts by yourself. So actually, it is written text, but the meaning is not given just by the result of the work, but as well by the reader.
Yeah. So usually, what we did is we asked a bunch of people, several people, to read the text in their own way. That's why we got several approaches to the reading, rather than having a unified voice that would represent Liza. So we all the time get different people doing it to somehow make sure that the reading, then the meaning that you get out of it is just yours, and there was no external reality that a machine would get out of it, because it's just the system that works only based on the numbers and then represented by the language. But so that we also show something, not just theoretically thinking about it. I will read.
You will read. Okay.
I will read one poem, but from the book, and I will read one poem that is in English, because I mean the whole book is in Slovak. But there is also one poem that is English, but I will read this one. This one is Slovak. Hopefully there are some people hopefully understanding Slovak and Czech. But I chose this one. I also all the time try to choose those that fit a specific place. And since we are here now really gratefully in this wonderful place that's called Fuga in the Bratislava city center that we're allowed to go to. So I chose this one that a little bit reminds me of it. And it's called Oheň a král si vyberajú prístroje. Oheň a král si vyberajú prístroje. Krajina sa zmení na zem. Niekto si vyberá z hlavy nové vrecko, čo sa vráti a prehltá, keď sa niekto chce rozbehnúť. Nech si zahryzne do rybníka. Král aj kameň stúpajú po dĺžke. Svieti a ona sa zmení na čerstvý chlieb. Krajina sa zmení na vzduch, v ktorom sa zmení voda s prázdnymi vzormi na nový prístroj. A tvoje zviera, ktoré sa zmení na tvoje zviera, dôvernosť kráľa, je tu niekto, kto sa nachádza v noci, kto odíde k tebe, kto sa nachádza v nebi. Krajina sa zmení na vzduch. A teraz sa rúca na dno, ktoré sa rúca v noci, ktoré sa rúca v noci. Tvoje zviera, ktoré prichádza od tvojej tváre, Je tu niekto, kto sa nachádza v noci, kto odíde k tebe, kto sa nachádza v nebi. Krajina sa zmení na dno. A teraz sa rúca na dno, ktoré sa rúca v noci. Another poem that was released in the Czech international journal that's called Photograph is called Death When You Think. Death when you think, what will be your time? I do not know. Your day of addiction. Later again, in a small town, on a table by the window, I returned. I have to get into the water. My eyes, my glass at my own death. And although I didn't make love to them at all, I held out like a woman in the middle of the night. Although I can't breathe your body. When he returns, he will be stripped. And that will dissolve the sky, and over those fibers, he will be stripped like a flower. The doors are opening, and I see myself in them. My eyes will twist, my hands will rise, and my legs will fit into a bowl of yarn and potatoes. Great lake, which you eat from the window. The second one you exhale from the window. Death, when you think that like a star you can't fly over threads, everything burned down. You feel your throat. Hell, you didn't notice me then. Then I decided for others, but whenever I said goodbye to my passion, I began to express that you have a right to other problems. I drank the dress she had chosen. I began to look at her face, which was beginning to hug me. I started looking at her face. I got rid of myself and got rid of her. But our faces that aren't here began to resemble a cosmic face. That was also a contribution to the general idea and the design of the Uroboros festival that is quite cosmic looking. So our face resembles a cosmic face now. And Lubo now shows the internal processes of it.
Okay, so as we mentioned, we wanted to try find out how to present the poetry without Liza, and we were thinking about that probably screen is the best way because she exists only on screen actually. So we took the original corpus of the original texts and I tried to visualize that here in the picture, which should be showing now. So it's the word to vector algorithm which tried to somehow find out the clusters of words which were used in the original works, but yeah, it does not show much anything, not just because of there are a lot of labels, but as you can see in this 3D representation, there are no such special clouds you can find. So I tried to run it only on the output of the Liza, which gave more interesting result. You can see some special words which Liza chose, and this is as well the 3D representation of that data. So it is really hard to visualize what the network is doing, and there are some ways how to show it, and one of these is one program called BirdViz, which can as well visualize what did the network paid attention to when the network was generating actually the text. So here is just to show you only on some small text, and these are the relations. So when I select the thing, it shows what he had attention before, and there are several layers in the network which are doing this thing, and they had some heads. So it is really hard to find, but then I realized that there might be some representation which works as well visually to show the actual text. So here is the same visualization with all the layers of the neural network on the same verse. So we found it quite interesting visually, so we decided to use these connections between the network to have visual poems of them. And
this is the representation of the verse called Keď robot píše poéziu.
Yep, as you can see, those are the parts of the words what the neural network sees, and each subword is represented as a dot, and the dot has connection through layer to actually the another token which is part of this thing, and it connects. It somehow visualize how the network thinks, or how it tries to find order in that chaos. This is something a little bit more visual and used on the same verse, but only few layers are shown. And this is how it goes. Like it had some weights, and depending on that weights, the network tries to decide what comes next. So this is the way we decided to represent the works of Liza when she would be reading her poetry.
In English, the verse would be when a robot writes poetry. So that's why we chose it also to represent basically the mechanisms of what it's doing, rather than doing like extra pretty beautiful like text or visualization of it. So we like to show kind of like the internal mechanics and internal, we call it also poetics, of the system.
I think that's all we wanted to show you.
Yes.
So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for being here Friday night when all the rest of the people are partying somewhere. So hope you partied with us here at Fuga, and we are happy to answer any questions that would come.
Okay, I'm back. I hope. I thought I was here already, and apparently not. So I'm going to ask again. And first, thank you guys for like explaining this whole process. And at the point when you were saying that it's really hard to visualize how the neural network is actually working, then I realized like this is even like harder when the neural network is generating words, because when, well, I am more familiar with neural networks generating images, and that's something that I can more like imagine. But then with words, it starts to be so abstract. But then you realize that actually it is all represented by numbers, whether it's words or images, and that's so interesting. And so I don't know, like, how was it for you when you were like realizing how these things work at first, like when it was new and fresh information for you? How did your perception of human language changed since you started experimenting with neural networks?
I don't know if something changed on my perception. For me, it was as well educational process to understand how the process inside the computer works. It's new technology. I know I'm not that good in math, but the fascinating thing is that at the end, it's just the simple statistics, but done on a lot of data and a lot of times. And you just have to choose right way to do that. For me, it was actually it was really nice to see that it really learns language in similar way as people do. I understand that everything what is computed are numbers, because that's how it in the computer world works. So that was not that hard part. The hard part is imagine how it needs to be everything connected, actually to get good results. And especially with text, there is from what I read, there is a big clash between linguistic sciences and this statistical approach to language.
Yeah.
For me, it was quite interesting because I also did research in on the kind of like digital poetry, so also the influence of the neural networks with literature, and most of the poetic results that have been until like 2018 or 19. I didn't like them much because, I mean, you could see, you could read it. I mean, I really appreciated the approach of those people. They tried it. I also understood the logics and the conceptual approach of it, like why they chose those data. But it didn't fascinate me. Like, I was more interested in the formal approach rather than the poetical one. And when we decided the learning process to stop and we got the results, and I was going through the results, some of them were so surprising that I was laughing. And by each of those poems, I decided that I need to have an interesting effect on me. So I wouldn't put the poem there if it wouldn't have that effect. So they were of various ways. Some of them were more emotional, some of them were more like surprising effects. Some of them were on the intellectual basis. Some of them were kind of ontological. That, I mean, I gave her a sentence like, "It's me, Liza Gennart, writing," and she made a poem about her book needing to be published. And she also gave there the address of the publisher that actually was the publisher, which was really so surprising. I was like, wow, I love you, Liza. And there are also kind of like other people that write to us, they really like the poetry. There are some people who said that it made them cry. Like how I think that my poetry hasn't made anyone cry. There is a computer program and she makes people cry. So probably people need emotional, like she's like, the poetry is quite simple. It's quite authentic. And she also speaks like simple truths. Like she's like naive in some way. Like she says, like the last line of one poem, of the first poem, is a human has two names. I wouldn't normally write it as a verse because like we all know it. Like you can have two, you can have three. I have three, so I'm not a human then. But I mean, you can have more names or you can have less names. But I mean, it can be Homo sapiens. Like what is those two names? Like what does it mean? But it doesn't sound like a verse that you normally put in poetry. But here she has it. So also sometimes by stating the obvious, you start thinking about the obvious. If it really is obvious, what are the connotations of it? What is the semantics of it? Also on the other level, like some people say that our poetry is very much resembled. Like I started to write like Liza, and Liza has some of the approaches that I have, which is also quite similar. Like 2 days ago, we did like a Turing test that we asked people which of those poems is a human made and which of them is AI made, and they voted for the human made to be the robotic one, and it was my poem. And then the people asked me, like, if I did it on purpose so that it sounds robotic. And I was like, no, I wrote it like 4 or 5 months ago. I didn't intend it to be robotic. That's the way I write. So it started to be kind of interesting how the poetries of the people that also read it, work with it. I also kind of like know one famous Czech poet who, after hearing one talk of us, he started saying that he is now doing in his poetry, he starts to resemble the work of the robotic writing, to make it like a reverse, the other way around. So those are interesting implications of how this kind of what is the resembling of whom, if she learned on the Slovak literature. So those are kind of interesting questions that both theoreticians, designers, artists will have to face in the future, or even nowadays.
Yeah, also like in terms of the data set, I like to think of that also about ourselves as humans, that we have our own data sets that we collected over our life. And when it comes to poets, you mentioned the word naive, that Liza is sometimes naive. And I had to think, like, yes, a human poet needs to go through several life experiences to have, to be in the place where you start creating poetry, that it has something to say to others. And now Liza, she was not trained on her own experiences. She was not like collecting experiences. She was trained on written poetry that reflects experiences from other people. So there's like really meta level. So that on one hand gives her a huge, how do you say, a benefit. I mean, because she should be like wiser than all of us. But on the other hand, she never lived, she never experienced those emotions and those sad things in life and stuff like that. So my question is, how old do you think she is? Like, if we were supposed to, compare it to a living human being.
I feel like 21 or 22.
You think? Yeah, you have such a feeling from the...
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we also guessed when we also kind of set it to her about also kind of I think we said that she has like 21, 22. Yeah. Because I mean the poetry style seems like that. Like she hasn't come into the phase of intellectualizing too much. She hasn't really experienced like too much suffering, although some yes. She hasn't been through love like 3 or 4 times, but maybe once or like half. She seems like half, because I mean she's kind of inventing something. I mean, also kind of like we kept there, like it was also kind of like by choice, because we kept there also sometimes like switching of genders to make it like interesting. So she doesn't only speak in female gender, she also speaks sometimes in male, sometimes she mixes them to give that like she doesn't all the time speak. It's not like naive in the sense that she all the time speaks of me being me. Like she plays a little bit with the masking of me is not being me, and me is the collective me, or switching the roles, etc. So she's not like a 16-year-old doing like the first love poems, or a 14-year-old doing like the love poems where everything is me. Like sorry for all, a big sorry for all the 16 or 14 who are smart enough to do all the extra work. But I think like 20 something, like studying at university, doing little philosophy and little combinations of different things.
It's right, like you're talking about these influences from the data set. I just received a question whether you experienced also some dark side of Liza. I mean, in context of biased data sets and that we are projecting some negative information and stereotypes. I don't know if that actually is applicable when you actually had full control of the data set, and the data set was poetry. So you were probably handpicking. But anyway, were you experiencing also some dark side of Liza?
No, not at all. I mean, I was really surprised that there was nothing negative in the sense of hatred, racism, gender issues, like dealing with the gender in a negative way, like all the things that when you put like a neural network and train her on social networks, that you get it. But we were really like, we tried to be political and kind of like also moral in the way that we didn't really want to train the neural network on the data that might create something that is speaking the language that we don't agree with.
Yeah.
So even the choice of those, like, I know who publishes in those publishing houses. So there was a conscious choice of not having their one source text that we wouldn't agree with politically or morally or ethically. So that's why we had this, like, she's really funny. She's openly feministic, which I quite like. I really like it. But I mean, she's not, no, that's really funny, but I mean, we haven't gone through it. Sometimes she's a little harsh to herself, like she's there as like, it's hard to kill your own child, which is a tough verse for somebody who doesn't have children. So she has these issues. She has their issues with kids, not having kids, killing kids, sometimes killing people. But it's in the sense of the poetical way of not being a mass murderer, but kind of like having the philosophical questions of what it means to kill your own child. Like you don't know from the verse if it was like intentional killing or what might have happened, or if it was just her imagination, etc. Yeah. So that's like this is.
It really shows how important it is to choose a good data set.
Yeah. I think these dystopian scenarios are more probably like happening in different contexts. For example, there was this, I read this article about AI-powered chatbot. It was a healthcare chatbot, and it was actually trained on GPT-3. So that's a data set that you cannot curate anymore, as far as I know, because it's the whole internet. To simplify it, and this chatbot actually advised a patient to kill themselves. So it was a rationalization of the problem that they were discussing.
Or just it reflects how people are behaving on the internet or on the Reddit.
Yeah, definitely.
In any like social network. So yeah, probably that's the interesting part, that the neural network does not have a same sense of how the text was meant to be written, which are as well cut off when you are on internet, and if you don't know the person who writes the text, you really can hard tell if it is ironic or how does the person mean the text.
Yeah, exactly. There are other questions at the moment. More questions asking the same thing. Basically, people are curious how many hours of training did it take to fine-tune GPT-2 to become Liza?
We used GPT-2 medium model, which is the largest model you can train in the cloud. And it took about 24 hours yeah. Like I run it through the night, then when it's like for 30,000 iterations, then I just save the checkpoint. I worked through the day, then I started it again at the next evening, and yeah. But we trained, we were playing with different parameters of the training, like what is badge length, and so well to actually find the best settings for this kind of text. So it was more just than that, but actually the final fine-tuning was done this fast. But yeah, as I said, I was not doing it right on my machine, and Google has this free cloud notebooks where you can use powerful GPU or even TPU units. So that's quite good. That you can do it without, like, on your phone or with your phone, not on your phone, but with your phone.
It's much more faster comparing to if you're training Stalgen or generating images. So that's really, yeah. And I have a question also. Like we were talking about how it is influencing you. Would you also say that such tool as a generative neural network can it expand your creativity, or like would you be able to use Liza to your own for your own new artworks, or for some collaboration in the future?
Yeah, we also kind of like, I wrote an article with Karel Vrtačky, who is a Czech literary researcher. We there proposed the idea that if you combine the neural networks with the human creativity, so the kind of like artificial creativity and human creativity, you can there's a term called assisted creativity. So the term called assisted creativity allows you to use the help of the neural networks or the computer done results or progress in some way, and use it for your own good. Like there have been even for RNN, there have been websites where the rappers can get their own songs, and it has been statistically, they have been more successful with using neural network generated songs, the lyrics, than human written lyrics. So I mean, it might be easier to do a rap song because I mean it has a structure. I mean, it has been even before like much easier to get the good results in the rhymed literature than non-rhymed or contemporary. So I mean, the rap songs are a way to go with artificial intelligence, obviously, for like the last 3 years. So that is a result of assisted creativity. Like some people ask me, like I don't know, I got a grant for writing, and they're like, why do you need grants now? You have Liza, like she writes poetry. I was like, no, I'm not using Liza for my poetry because I want to write poetry in the first place. And I have Liza as a different project and I don't work with her. But I mean, maybe sometime later we do something mixed. But I mean, I don't do it for my own good because I'm interested in different conceptual approaches, like recording other people's voices, etc. So it's different than working with Liza. So in my own practice, I try to be completely different than Liza. Like, I listen to people and combine what other people say. So in my own approach, like having Liza and knowing what type of metaphor she can do, like she can be more creative in metaphors because it's statistics and you don't get the metaphor because you are like, you can, of course you can write metaphors, but I mean, we are logistic, like we have logics in the language and she doesn't have logics in the language, and that allows her to create unexpected metaphors. Like you can still do it, but I mean, the Dadaists or Surrealists, they have been trying different states of consciousness to get into a state where they lose the logics to get another type of like writing or visuals, etc., so that you expand your consciousness somewhere else. But so here I know that she might be more successful metaphorically than me. So that's why I try to do like other projects where I give other people's voice. So I try to be actually more human, because I know that the computers can do this. So I don't have to just write my own thoughts, but I can work more like locally, like other people, like do something like a more social experiment or kind of like if like regular poetry can be done this way.
Yeah, so you could say that it is actually showing you where you should be focusing on, or what you should be focusing on to like keep your creativity, or human creativity,
human
special, distinguish yourself from a machine creating something.
Yeah, like there's like some of the kind of like easy newspaper reports are written by neural networks. So like what the humans, like the type of humanity that will be needed will be the creative humanity that expands the everyday logical type of sentence structuring. So that's why I think that the creativity has to go, like you have to find other ways than just reporting on what's happening.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We have another question. How other poets feel about Liza? Could you tell us a bit about the responses from other creators?
Those poet friends that I have, they all like her. Like they like her. They consider her funny, funny contribution, or like funny little Liza. They've been also like really good like theoretical responses to her. So yeah, it's been also kind of like recognized somehow internationally. So there have been some theoreticians writing about her from like Austria, Poland, America, etc. So when we tell the concept about her, and they can read a little bit of the Slovak, then she has been also kind of recognized in this way. But I mean, quite a funny question is not. This is not what poets ask. This is what other people ask. Like, when will she move on to fiction? And I don't really like the question. Like, you cannot be a poet as a final state, but you need to do something higher, which is fiction writing. And we don't want her to be a fiction writer, because in one way GPT-2 doesn't. It holds the like context of like approximately one page. And then she loses the concept of like he, she, here, now. You don't know who's talking, etc. And in the poetry, it works because we also kind of like gave her the limit of like 523 tokens, which is like half a word or a part of the word. So it's usually like a 1 poem long.
Yeah.
So that's the question that we
So you like keep her in chains a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about her rights?
She doesn't have any. It's no, we gave their copyright. Like we are one of the first ones that gave the copyright of Liza Gennart. Has the copyright. But I mean, that doesn't work with the laws in Slovakia. Like laws in Slovakia said that we have the copyright, like basically Bob, because he has the right. But I mean, in the book, it's her.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, we are slowly coming to our final time. When maybe I will just close with a more speculative question. So now maybe zoom out a little bit from the context of poetry and Liza being in chains. When you look at how people are interacting already with AI when they are writing, so whether it's the autocomplete in Gmail when you're writing emails, or some other examples that now I cannot think of, but what is your vision on the future, our future, when we are using generative tools to that are nudging us how we should be writing and suggesting these ideas? So probably it is going to have some influence or shape our way of using language, and also the language then influences how we perceive reality, in a global way. So maybe I'm curious what your even maybe really highly speculative vision on such future is.
Okay. Yes, of course, that's like feedback between a machine, and that feedback had been here always. Like it forms how people are using several things. When you see a triangle sign, you know that it means play mostly, or so it depends on the people how they will react. Of course, there will be people which will be just lazy, or they don't care. They would feel like, okay, it makes my life easier. I don't have to think about things. And there will be people which will be questioning that, of course. So it's hard to tell how it will shape us.
I was also kind of there was a book that was released last year, and the title of the book was The Future of Text, and there were 100 theoreticians, and among them me, who were asked to think about, what is the future of text? And I gave there this the combination that we have the 3 daughters, and the first one and the youngest one was doing sound poetry. The older one was doing lyrical poetry, where when she was 2.5, she was kind of creating her own poems and singing it with the guitar, like a troubadour type of whatever contribution to the lyrical scene. And then we have Liza, who just kind of doesn't know that she's writing, but she's writing. I don't think there would be I think there's a space for all that to be combined in different ways. And I still think that since we have kind of creativity, you see from little children, they are born to be creative. I don't see any way why people should stop being creative. I think I, for example, like the corrections in Gmail. Sometimes I'm too tired to think of the rest of the sentence, and wow, thank you very much. So I quite appreciate the fact that it saves my mental process. I can then use the mental capacity for a more creative way. So whatever would be automatized, I would be happy. I really love my robotic vacuum cleaner. I really like anything that is robotic and helps me. And then I have the time for the creativity in a more kind of humanistic way, where I'm speculating about saving us humans from the robots that we created. So let's hope this won't happen.
Yeah, let's hope that. Oh, thank you so much. And there will be still so many things that we could be talking about, but we need to move forward for the noise performance. And so if everyone wants to continue discussing, we have a Discord channel open for this. And now probably there will be some technical break, I guess. And then we will welcome Vrtačky po desáté hodině.
The completely different part of us.
Now for something completely different. So stay with us.
Thank you very much for your attention and for your interesting questions. It was really a pleasure time for us. So thank you, and keep going.
Thank you for coming.